welcoming you here onto the field at Reser Stadium following Oregon State's 39-31 double overtime win against Colorado State. Oregon State improves to 4-1 in the craziest way possible. In the next couple minutes, Ryan and I are going to attempt to break down what happened here at Reser Stadium. And obviously make sure to check into BeaversEdge.com, as Ryan and I will have 5 takeaways from tonight's matchup. And believe me, they're going to be pretty in-depth, and we got a lot to get into because, wow. There is no way that we can compress everything that happened in this game into this Beaver's Edge breakdown video as much as we'd like to, Ryan. Or it might be a Beaver's Edge podcast here live. Like we might be pushing podcast numbers, and no one wants that this time of night.
No. You all want to go home, relax, and celebrate this win.
Exactly. What he said, right? So let's go ahead and just kind of dial it down. Obviously, turns out to be a double overtime matchup. Oregon State scores or Colorado State scores first. They take a 7-0 lead. Second quarter, Oregon State outscores them 14-3. Ends up being a 14-10 game at the half, and there was like Oregon State kind of figured some things out, outside of the Giovanni McCoy interception early, which basically handed Colorado State those first points. You're like, okay, things are looking good. And let's, for the sake of this, first half thoughts, Ryan, as they were up, 14-10 into the break, and then got the ball. We felt pretty good at the half.
Felt pretty good at the half. They were kind of, coming out of the bye a little bit asleep on both ends there, but again, by the time second quarter started to roll around, then, you started to see the offense kind of wake up a little bit and kind of get into that rhythm early, and I think that really helped in being able to get some second half momentum into at least a little bit there to be like, okay, we see what you can do at Colorado State, got kind of punched in the mouth a little bit, but being able to respond I thought was really huge for them. And and it was still kind of a more of like when I was coming out of halftime, I was kind of thinking like, all right, like get some points, give yourself a little bit more breathing room, because at that point, it's only a 4-point game and you're, within one score. And so it's a little like, just got to see what adjustments were made and just being able to, give them some breathing room, because at the end of the day, it's like with the way that defense was playing at times, especially in the first half, and kind of included over a little bit into the second half, it was kind of like, this game is still close, even though the box score says absolutely different of what that game could have been. And I think I even said to you up there that even after that first quarter where things could have gone a whole different mess of ways, Oregon State was pretty lucky that it was only a 1-score game in the first quarter.
It was, and I think that's very apropos. And then, you just to show how weird this game is, ho-hum, I didn't even recognize this until afterwards. Again, this game was so up and down, it was so hard to keep track at times. Nobody scored in the third quarter. Zeros. So you sit
That's
there
wild.
and you think about that now, and I'm like, zeros. Okay. Then it started, right? You get Giovanni McCoy with a run. Torrey Horton gets a touchdown. Then Colorado State gets another touchdown. And then that sets up, and again, I think Oregon State's film study is going to reveal a lot of problems. And you look at this, Colorado State, they outscored Oregon State, 14-10 the fourth quarter. Oregon State obviously got the better of them in overtime, but Colorado State 10 points first half, 14 in the fourth quarter. And, you kind of look at how that came to be. Some really just bad coverages downfield. The run game was like, hey, this guy just runs kind of this buck sweep kind of a thing. He finds a hole. The run defense, again, we just looked at those numbers. Colorado State, Ryan, another 200 yards in the ground tonight. So, that's not the numbers we've come to expect for Oregon State. But real quick, before we kind of dive into our big takeaways from the game, I want to zero in on that final drive that allowed Oregon State to kick the game-tying field goal to force overtime. Because we all know what happened in overtime. Oregon State was obviously able to get a couple scores and then ultimately held Colorado State late. Some great play. But Ryan, none of it happens without a couple enormous plays on that drive. You and I were looking at each other after Colorado State, right here in front of us, ran a little wheel route to score and take the lead, and it was one of the easiest. You're just like the air came out of the stadium.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, a buck and some change on the clock. Let's see what they can do. They start dinking and dunking down the field. They even run the ball once. But Anthony Hankerson fumbles the ball. And if Josh Gray, senior leader, 6-year senior, is not right there in that moment to grab that ball, Ryan, the game's over. I mean, it's ball game. It's ball game. And I think of that. I think of several plays that Darius Clemens made on that drive, several huge catches from Trent Walker, and I'll be honest, Everett Hayes had a lot of criticism coming into this week.
And fair criticism too on top of that, but he hit when it mattered, and ultimately in the end, that's what people are going to remember, and that's what people will care about in the end. But yeah, it's more of like he's had his struggles, but he came through when his team needed him to come through, and can't say much more than that. Like, Hayes has shown that he can make those big kicks in games before. And he did it again tonight.
Yeah, he hits the 44-yarder, and I remember you and I were just kind of sitting there being like, ugh. And, it looked good away, and Trent Bray mentioned the postgame, it was able to be blocked super well. And obviously then we get into overtime, and, the two teams, Colorado State starts first. It looks like Oregon State might be able to get off the field right then. And penalties, some other things. Then Oregon State bounces back. Giovanni McCoy gets a 19-yard rush. And then ultimately, Anthony Hankerson, finishes it off. And then Jermaine Terry catches the 2-point conversion. But Ryan, I don't want to seem too biased. I think there were some calls on both sides. But it really seemed like there were a couple times on fourth down where, like, Colorado State's just life was extended. And compared to Oregon State, I don't think there were any fourth down penalties that kept their drives alive. There were multiple for Colorado State tonight, excuse me.
Oh yeah. It's officiating consistency was a big problem, and that's something where it's like, hey, in the end, the way I see it is good teams overcome bad calls, and Beavers were able just to overcome enough to be able to secure that win. But yeah, there's a lot of those where it's just like you thought, where oh, Beavers are going to get off the field here, right. And then you see the yellow flag come up, and you're kind of looking, you're like, well, drive is continuing.
There were more than
on.
More than a few, and and I think that was a big part of the game. Obviously, I mean, you get back to a bunch of the numbers themselves, and this game really turned out to be a lot more even than a lot of us could have ever imagined. And conversely, there were some key Colorado State penalties that benefited the Beavers, albeit in less or die situations kind of a thing. But I think, that was interesting as well. And then we'll go ahead and close with this. Everything else, make sure to head to BeaversEdge.com. Ryan and I's complete thoughts. Jam Griffin. Oregon State's leading running back leaves the game early. Again, not to speculate. He went in the medical tent, came out with crutches, took some embraces from coaches, teammates before going into the locker room. He was then ruled out for the game. I asked Trent Bray if he was ready to rule him out for the season. I know that's a very bold and declarative statement, but in today's injury world, it seems that coaches will only confirm if a player is out for the year. I did ask that. Trent Bray said it's too early to see. Regardless, though, Ryan, just real quick, how much more is Saladin Allah, Jake Reichel, and maybe even the freshman Cornell Hatcher going to get involved? Because we saw Hank be a dude tonight. Hank can't do it by himself.
Oh, no. In today's college football world, you're not going to have that bell cow back like you normally would. There are exceptions to that, of course. Obviously, Ashton Jeanty, Boise State.
Yeah, he ain't coming off the field ever.
But typically, and the way that what this staff wants to do is they're gonna go by committee, and they're gonna go with the hot hand when it's needed. But I think you're gonna see a lot of Allah, you're gonna see a lot of Reichel, and then Cornell Hatcher is a guy that Coach Ford spoke of this week headed into Saturday. He's very confident in what Hatcher can bring to the table, and feels very confident too of bringing him up and incorporating him into the offense.
Yeah.
Due to if injury should arise, and injury has arisen with Griffin expected to miss some time. Don't know how long or what the severity of his injury is, but I think they're going to be, you're going to see a lot more action for especially the two freshmen this year, and when we get into the latter half of the schedule as well too. And I expect Reichel's role to potentially increase a little bit too. Yeah. He'll be primarily short yardage situations, but I would expect him to see an uptick in the volume of carries that he gets as well.
Again, Oregon State gets the double overtime win, 39-31. They improved to 4-1, take a huge step forward towards bowl eligibility this season. I mean, Colorado State came in 2-2. Oregon State was 3-1. If Colorado State wins this game, Oregon State goes to 3-2. You're thinking about getting to that 6-win mark in a much different way. Now they just need 2 more wins to reach bowl eligibility, and obviously that's not the goal to reach bowl eligibility. But in a season like this, Ryan, with everything that happened in the offseason. Got to throw this out there too. No first time Oregon State head coach has ever gone 4-1. So Trent Bray's off to the best start of any first-year Oregon State head coach that wasn't a head coach somewhere else previously.
Yeah, and that's a testament.
And that's impressive.
Yeah, that's a testament to what Bray's been able to do with this new staff and with the players that he's brought in through the transfer portal, through the recruiting cycle, and retaining talent here that was already on the roster from last year. That speaks volumes of what he's been able to build so far, and he'll only continue to improve and get better. And a lot of the coaching first-time situations that he'll go through as a head coach and figuring out timeouts, decision-making to go on fourth down will improve over time. But that's something you get with more experience going forward. But it's a huge testament to what he's been able to do. And I really think if you had asked me at the start of this year that Beavers would be 4-1 right now, I probably would not have believed it given the state of everything that had happened in the offseason.
Yeah,
but
just if you had told us that in December.
Yeah.
Right? Told us that in December of last year when Trent Bray is getting this job, 4-1. I think every Beaver fan would take that wholeheartedly. So that's where the Beavers stand. They're 4-1. They got Nevada on the road down in Reno this next weekend. Obviously, Beavers Edge will be bringing you guys our usual road game coverage. And interestingly enough, Nevada was in a dogfight, lost to San Jose State on the road tonight. So that is no gimme game either. And, for what it's worth, I'm sure Beaver fans remember the last time they went down to Nevada, and that ended up in a heartbreaking loss as well. So Beavers go to the road. Second road game of the season after just going on for San Diego State earlier in the year. A big shout out to Ryan Harlan. And again, make sure to check out BeaversEdge.com. So much more than what we offered in this video alone. If you're not yet a subscriber, join. We have an awesome 30-day free trial. You get everything that me, Ryan, TJ, the whole Beavers Edge crew brings to the table. So again, for Ryan Harlan, Brenden Slaughter signing off from Reser Stadium.